So if you see me chugging a cup of tea, it's literally so that I can stay warm as well. So a little bit more of an introduction about me to start off with. So I'm Matt Weston, and I'm the managing director of a small company in the Midlands called Vantage 365. Now, I was obviously listening to some of those conversations that were taking place just around how do I actually get my career started within the Power Platform, and Raz really did pick up on the great point that we have really two big communities coming together within the Power Platform. Generally, it was all based on the Dynamics community using the Power Platform. I very much come from the Microsoft 365 side. I spend a lot of my time working around Microsoft Teams, around SharePoint, but really bringing the power of the Power Platform to bear for everybody who's also working in that side, not just necessarily the CRM aspect. Now, a little bit about my background. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, so I do like to get technical with a lot of the training sessions I take. But I do also like getting involved with the end user training, so taking people who don't necessarily have the technical background and getting them using the tools. I am a business applications MVP, but I know nothing about CRM. I've literally just bought myself a couple of books to actually start learning it a little bit more. But again, I spend a lot of my time in the Power Platform, so Power Apps, Power Automate space. I am an automation geek, self-confessed, and if I can automate something, I will automate it. So everything that I normally try and do manually, I will always try and find the time to automate it, because why should I do it myself? If I can get something doing it for me, then I can spend my time doing something different. And when I do find some really useful things, then I do post on my YouTube channel. So you can find me at youtube.mattweston365.com. And you'll find hopefully some good little snippets of information on there as well, particularly if you are new to the platform and you are still trying to find your way. So this morning, then, we're talking about driving adoption and governance for Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the governance aspects and about what I consider governance, first of all, just to help frame the conversation. So like I say, I come very much from the Microsoft 365 side. I'm also going to be looking at the adoption of Microsoft Teams and what probably the things that are maybe counterintuitive for the adoption. So some of the things that do have a negative impact. But then why not bring it all together? Why not start to look at how we can drive both the governance and the adoption? How can we give our users a positive experience by using Power Automate? So that's exactly what I'm going to be trying to do this morning. And what we'll actually see later on, I will get to the point where we can go through an entire demo, but we're going to take it right from start to finish. I'm going to explain all the key aspects that I've built into this one particular solution. And then that will hopefully give you some good ideas, some good use cases to go and start using in your own environments and your own tenancies. As we are going, obviously, I can see there's a number of people active in chat, so please do ask questions. I don't just want this to be the Matt Weston show. I'd like to get you guys involved as well. So please do ask questions as we go. So let's start off then. Let's talk about Microsoft Teams governance. Now, governance, no matter what platform you are trying to govern, whether it's the Power Platform, whether it's Teams, whether it's SharePoint, the G word is always one of those taboo subjects. So people always want to try and shy away from it. And that's generally because either they don't want to have the difficult conversations, maybe they don't quite understand the different methodologies that you can apply to governance. And so they decide not to do it. And as a result, at some point in the future, it might be a few months, it could be a couple of years. Lack of governance will eventually bite. Whether what we see in the Microsoft Teams world, as an example, is lots of sprawl, lots of people creating teams. I mean, how many people have gone and created a team called Test Map 123 or something along those lines? You multiply that by your number of employees, and all of a sudden you've got a lot of noise in what should be quite a clean and quite concise and easy to use environment. So how do we actually go about trying to govern that in the first place? So when I talk about Teams governance, I like to try and build up my layers. So I always start with a tenancy. So I start from an IT perspective. So what do we need to set on the tenancy in order to provide the protection, in order to provide the controls around the usage, and how do we then almost assure that the platform is going to be safe for our users to go ahead and start using on a day-to-day basis. So we start off in the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, and we then slowly start to move forward. So once we've configured our tenancy settings, we can start to look at the data classifications, the sensitivity. So we're now starting to add not just the baseline settings, we're now starting to add assurance around the way that our teams and the way our data is being stored and used. So at the moment, we're still very much in the behind the scenes type of area. We're still very much in the IT administrators realm of comfort. But one of the big things around governance is that we cannot forget the end users. So how do we start to build a governance plan that is based on giving the users a good experience? Well, we can start off by making some things consistent. So one of the biggest things that we have found around governance, and again, this will touch into adoption, is that if we have a lack of consistency to the way that we build our teams, the way that we manage them, and the same applies for a lot of different things, then you tend to get people either not using them, using the tools incorrectly, because they go from one place to another and it's different. They don't know where it should be going. So what do? They go and start to try and find their own ways of doing things. And that's not what we want in a good governance model. We want that consistency. We want people to be able to find their data. We want people to be able to use things as easy as possible. So if we can create something that gives us that consistency, then that's going to help us to start build and manage this governance model. And what we've got in Teams already is we have Teams templates, but I'm going to approach this from a different way this morning. I'm going to approach this from a Power Automate perspective. So this is really where we're going to start our journey with the automation side. Part of a good governance model is the guidance and communication. So I can't just throw a tool out there. I can't just throw some rules out there and expect our users to be able to understand it and work within it. Because not everybody speaks the same language. Not everyone understands jargon. Not everyone understands the same terminology. So we need to be able to provide that guidance and that communication to everybody, regardless of whether they're a new Teams user, regardless of whether they are a veteran. We need to be able to hold their hands. We need to be able to give them that guidance and communication to be able to use that tool properly. And then the most important part is the adoption aspect. So we can put all of these rules in place. We can put all of these controls there to protect the users and to try and the guidance to try and help them. But if we don't do it in the correct way, then it's pointless because we haven't got that adoption. And what I've always seen with a governance plan is that it always seems to be one side of the spectrum or the other. It either seems to be the team's defaults, which is, it's open. You can go and do what you want to. You can go and do what you need to. And then all of a sudden, you've got a massive sprawl. You've got a load of teams that are all there, not really adding any value to what you're trying to achieve as an organization. So what generally happens when we come across that? Well, IT teams generally have a bit of a knee-jerk reaction and they go the complete opposite end of the spectrum. So rather than allowing the users to be able to go and create everything, they lock everything down. And so then that becomes, yes, from a sprawl point of view, it means we're now controlling the environment. From an adoption point of view, I know from personal experience from a previous organization that I worked for who completely locked everything down, that I went and found my own way of doing things. I would find the path of least resistance for me. So what we're trying to do with Microsoft Teams governance, and this is where we're going to see the Power Automate and the rest of the Power Platform coming in this morning, is that we're going to try and find that balance. We're going to try and find a way of being able to maintain control, but still allow the users that empowerment to go ahead and do what they need. So we're going to try and build quite a nice governance process. But then we've also got the Teams adoption side. Now I've already touched on this because this was the pinnacle of my adoption pyramid. This for me is the most important thing. This is why do we do anything if we're not going to get our users to use it? So we need to give some consideration to how we get our users to adopt the solution. Yeah, throwing a solution out there, throwing a tool out there, no matter how much you beat the drum saying this tool is amazing, unless you do some adoption work, it's never actually going to really take off. Because one, people won't know how to use it. They don't know what they're supposed to use it for. So there is some adoption activity that needs to take place in order for us to be able to get our return, get the return on investment for what we're actually going to be deploying. So SharePoint Mark's just popped up in chat saying, don't forget the complications of licensing, especially around security and DLP. Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things in that governance model do require licensing, and that's one of the conversations that's had. Thank you for that, Mark. So with regards to the adoption, what are we trying to achieve? How do we make this as simple as possible? Well, what we're trying to do is, like I've said, we're trying to get people using it. And we have the same challenges, regardless of whether it's Microsoft Teams or whether it's the Power Platform. We are trying to get people to use the tools. And to get people to use the tools, we need to make it easy. Yeah, we need to make it as simple as possible for them to be able to do their job. As soon as they feel that little bit of pressure, as soon as they feel that little bit of resistance, users, no matter how tech savvy they are, they will go back to using what they are used to. They will go back to the tools that they are most familiar with. And 9 times out of 10, that's probably not what you're trying to get them to use. So we need to make things easy. But we need to keep that empowerment there. So everything around Microsoft 365 and around Power Apps, Power Automate, Power VA, especially now it's in Teams, is designed for the end users to be able to pick up and find solutions to their own problems. So we're empowering the users, and the moment we take that empowerment away, again, we're starting to fight a losing battle. We are starting to have that counter effect to everything that we're trying to achieve with some good adoption work. We're trying to make things safe. So with the safety aspect, which whilst we are trying to get people to use these platforms, they have to feel safe. They have to feel like that things are in control, that it's not just going to become the Wild West. It's not going to become anarchy. That it has that control. So if you can combine empowerment and safety together, then you know what, you're actually going to end up with quite a nice, quite a well-adopted platform. And then behind all of that, drive the understanding, drive the reasons behind why we're using the platform, why we are using a governance plan, why we are doing things in a specific way. If you just throw something out there and expect users to understand why it's being used, then unless you provide the context and the reasons why, then generally they won't get it. And again, you'll receive pushback. So those are really the things that we're going to focus on during the rest of this session. So how do we apply the Power Platform? How do we go and use Power Automate to help drive that governance piece, to help drive that adoption piece, bring it all together for a positive user experience so that your users are going to start using the tools in the way that you want them to, in a safe way, and within the confines of that governance plan. So to really bring all this together, I'm going to first of all talk about the connectors that we have available within Power Automate. And it probably comes as no surprise that this morning I'm going to be focusing on Microsoft Teams. So the Microsoft Teams connector has massively matured over the last few months. There's a number of things that are really in preview now that I recommend that you go and start to look at. So we have a number of triggers available for us that we can start to work with, again, to try and either maintain control, maintain awareness over what's going on within our Teams environment, or we can actually start to use some of the actions that are now provided in the connector to actually go and try and fulfill as many of the requirements that I've already spoken about. So with regards to the triggers, when I'm looking at governance, what I'm really interested in is when people are added to Teams, when people are removed from Teams. So that way I can, as maybe a tenant administrator, or maybe just someone who's looking after Teams, because I could empower my end users to be looking after the environment. Maybe we want to know when people are being added and removed from Teams, particularly if they are key people and maybe they need to be added back in. So I can start to look at how we can use these connectors, how we can use these triggers to really help maintain that awareness of what's going on. But what I'm actually going to be doing a lot today is focusing on the actions, because if I want to create a good clean environment, a well-controlled and a well-informed user base, then what I want to do is start to use some of these actions, such as creating teams, creating channels, adding members to a team, so that I can make sure that if I've got my own provisioning process in place, then I'm creating things in a consistent way, that all of my teams are built off a set structure, and that I've got the right people in the right teams at the right time. So if I can do that automatically, then I'm saving myself time. Because how long does it take us to create a team normally? If it's a case of let's say it takes a few seconds to create a team, but then it takes maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes to go and create all of the channels that I need in a particular team. That's 10 minutes I get back to me if I can automate it. Right, so in chat we've got some Daniel, some actions stay in preview for quite a while. Am I right to not use them in production until they're out of preview, or do other people take a different approach? So I personally, as soon as I see things going to preview, I do like to start using them, but I always keep in mind that while it's in preview, it is still susceptible to change. So it's not quite as risky as when it's experimental, but if it's in preview, there might still be things that are changing behind the scenes. So whilst I might use it for production, I might actually just spend a little bit more time monitoring it while it's in preview, just to make sure that everything's still working. Other people might be a little bit more risk averse and won't use anything until it comes out to preview. But I tend to, because I tend to build error handling into all of my flows, it does mean that if something does go wrong, then I'm at least alerted and I can try and take corrective action for it. But that's a great question. Thank you, Daniel. So let's apply our actions to some scenarios. And the scenarios that I'm going to be covering this morning are teams creation processes. So how can we start to build out a consistent approach, a nice and simple approach to creating our teams in the first place? And yes, there are tools out there that you can use that will do this in a much more graphical way. But this is the basics of what we can build using Power Automate. We'll also look at how we can provide support to our users. So how can we pull things together from different places, and then how do we actually then get that messaging out to the users who need it? And then really what I'm going to focus on the end is overlapping governance with SharePoint. So organizations will have a Teams governance plan, they'll have a SharePoint governance plan, and never the twain shall meet. But SharePoint provides that underlying file structure for Teams. So why not start to bring the two together? Why not start to do some things on the SharePoint side, again, just to promote everything that we've just been talking about for the team side, providing that consistency, providing the structures. So we'll have a look at how we can really start to build those together as well. So we're going to focus on, like I said, three specific scenarios. The first is creating the teams. And it's very, very simple. We're just going to take a request from a user. We're going to create a team, and we are going to deliver that team to the end user. Now, I can already hear people going, well, actually, Teams does that anyway. But what we'll see in a moment is we're actually going to try and do this in a more controlled way. So once we've done that, we're then going to bring in the support. So how do we then create the team, send some relevant information to them, and maybe promote an internal community? Because one of the big areas that I always see lacking with Microsoft Teams is that there is that lack of internal community, there's that lack of community support. Now, if you are familiar with the Center of Excellence for the Power Platform, that's one of the things that is massively pushed. So when we create an app or a flow or whatever it is that we create, we can track who those people are. We can invite them all into a community so they can start to support each other. So why not take that whole Center of Excellence approach and make it more wider than just the Power Platform? So we'll look at how we can start to do that within the Microsoft Teams world as well. And then finally, like I said, we'll look at the overlapping governance with SharePoint. So quite often when we try and bring together SharePoint governance, we try and bring together that consistency. One of the greatest ways of doing that within SharePoint is to have everything as a hub site or joined to a hub so that we can have a consistent global nav. So that way it doesn't matter if I'm navigating through Teams or if I'm coming at it from SharePoint, I can still find the information that I'm looking for. So what we'll do is we'll create a team, we'll find the associated SharePoint site, and we're automatically going to add that into a hub site so that we can then get some governed branding and also a consistent global nav. So these are the three things that I'm going to focus on. So let's go and have a look at what we've got. I've got a number of different components that are working together. Obviously, I've got Microsoft Teams. I've got a SharePoint list. Now, I'm using SharePoint for this because it was the easiest for me to go and set up. By all means, use any data source that you want. I'm not using relational data for this, so I'm not necessarily too worried about using Dataverse. But you know what? If you do want to make this take this to the next level, or even if you wanted to manage this in SQL, which I've seen some customers do, then use whichever data source that you want based on what licensing you have available. So everything that I'm doing at the moment is done just on on standard licensing from Microsoft 365. So what are the key components then? So here I have a request list. My request list is going to take some basic information. It's going to look at what the team is that needs to be created, its creation status, so we can track that, the template that's been selected, and so on. So just some very basic information for me to be able to go and start to use within my automations. What I've also got sat behind the scenes is a very, very simple template list. So my templates basically allow me to select from a specific type of template. I'm going to have some usage information, some terms for using that type of template. And then I've just got some basic channels that I want created. So just in this case, for a project management and delivery. So that's all I'm actually doing in terms of data storage. But what I've got actually sitting behind the scenes from this is I have a flow. Now, the flow is just designed to fire when a new item is created. And all it's going to do is wait for something to go and drop into that request list and then go and actually do something for us. So I've broken my demos down into some scopes, so we can start to introduce these bit by bit. So if I look at my team creation piece, first of all, one of the key things that most people seem to want in order to try and give that governed approach to managing Microsoft Teams are approvals. And a lot of the time, people, IT teams will go, actually, if you want a team, you need to go and raise it in whatever our service desk software is. But do we always need it? Can we go with something more simple? Can we go with a standard approval? So that's exactly what I've done here. So based on some information that's coming through from my team, all I'm doing is firing off a very simple approval with all the information in there. And then once we actually get our response back, hopefully a positive approval, then we are going to go through and we're going to start to have a look at creating our teams. Now, our teams are based on creating a team in the first place and creating some channels in there. So if we think back to what I had in my template list, I had a list of channels. It's not a very complicated channel. I'm not adding tabs. All I'm doing is adding in just some very basic channels. So in my process, I can get the information about that team. So I can go and find the information from the templates. I can then go and create the team. And because I'm creating the team, because I'm using a governed approach to actually going and creating it, one of the things that I can actually enforce is a naming convention. So I can specify that if my teams are created on a specific template type, I'm going to have the template at the beginning, and then I'm going to have the title. How does that help me? Well, that helps me when I'm actually trying to find my teams. When I'm trying to arrange my teams, I know that if I go and search for project, I'm going to be able to bring all my projects back. So it's just a way of being able to bring that organization back into Microsoft Teams. And it means that everything is named correctly. So I don't have to worry about going and slapping the wrists of somebody who's created a team and named it incorrectly because they haven't put spaces between the hyphens or they haven't done something else. So it means that I can start to bring in contextual information into that team name. And from there, I can start to build out my channels. So I can take my string, that's all it was in SharePoint, I can split it, create myself a little array. And then for each of those channels, I can go and create my consistent list of channels. I'm not stopping my users going and creating things additional afterwards, but if we're all starting from the same foundation, we're all starting from the same start point, then you know, we're off to a good start. We're going to have that consistency for all of our users. And all I'm going to do then is just write back saying, actually, yeah, we're all good. We've created the team and it's been created. So I've got that visual update in my list to say that actually now all of this has been created. And what I normally tend to do as well, I do like to track the team ID, because actually once I've got that information centrally stored, then it means that I can then write other flows, other automations off the back of that to then say, actually, we might want to send some reminders out. I did something similar to this for people who wanted automatic reminders to all of the users of particular templates. They needed to be reminded on the usage on a monthly basis. So every month we had an iterative or a standard flow based on a schedule that was going out. It was saying just sending messages as a reminder to say, actually, these are the terms and conditions of using this particular template. You still need to abide by it. So that gave them a tick in the box for making sure that people were always aware of how they should be using these teams. And you know what? Then what we can do is we can start to say, actually, now that we've done that, we can notify our users. And yes, I can send an email, but the whole point of using Teams is that we can get away from emails. But you know what? I can actually just, but if I do look at some of the basic information that I can send obviously thank you. I can send some team usage information. I can send the terms. So without me having to worry about going and speaking to those people, I can provide them with the information that they need to understand how to use the template and how to use it properly. So from that adoption, from that assurance of my governance model point of view, you know what? This is all starting to come together. It's all starting to be able to give that assurance across my environment. But like I said, without going off on too much of a rant, I am a sworn enemy of email. So I live my life in Teams. So I don't particularly want to be notified of this information by email. So I'm going to close that back down for a bit, and I would normally get rid of that. But it's useful to know that it's there still. What can I do? Well, actually, what I could do is send that user a message instead. I can send them a chat message. I can still provide all of that contextual information that I've just done within my email. But you know what? Let's just send them a message in Teams because that's where I will go to go and find my information. I will normally go into my chats. I'll be using my search at the top. If I live my life in Teams, why should I expect my users to go outside of it to go and find some help information? So I would tend to try and send this as a message, but you know what? It's structured exactly the same. I can still send HTML. I'm still going to get that rich information coming through directly to the user so that there's no way that they can actually say they've not seen that information. But if I think about this, at the moment, I'm only sending that message to one person. What would actually be much more beneficial is for me to actually, rather than just sending it to the person, it would really be useful if everybody in the team understood the usage, everyone in the team understood the terms. So rather than just using the post a message in chat, why not start to think about actually sending the notification in the team? So now, again, just using the Microsoft Teams connector so far, we can start to look at how we get that information directly into the team so that the first time that we go and hit it, the first time we go and look at our team, you know, it's got the information there for us. It's been posted. So me plus anybody else who's now joining that team, we're aware. We know what the rules are. So one of the nice things that I can do is I can generate an @mention token. Because I know who the person is who's going to create it, so I'm going to @mention them just to make 100% certain that they are aware that that message has been sent through. So I generate an @mention for them, and all I need to do is provide the email address that I want to send it to. But then it's not quite as simple as saying, actually, I need to send a message to the general channel, because when we're posting messages, we actually need to provide let's go and have a look. I need to provide a channel ID. Then I need to be able to figure out what that ID is. But we can, again, without really working that hard, we can find the channel, we can find the channel ID. So again, all of this aspect, it means that I don't have to do anything myself. Everything is still completely automated. So I can get my list of channels from the team, and I know what my team ID is because that was the output from my actual team creation piece. Yes, I need to do a little bit of work. I need to find out what my channel actually is. So I'm going to. I know that I've always got a general channel, so I'm going to filter my channel list by where the channel name is general. I'm going to just pass my response back so that I can at least use it as dynamic content. And from there, I can then bring it all together into my poster message. So I know I can bring my team ID from my create team. I can bring my ID from my filter array. And then all of that great stuff that we saw going out in the email, all of that really useful information is now posted into the team. So at this point, I've now got a team created based on the structure that I want. I've set my notifications. So now we're in a good place. All of this is now pulled together. So a couple of questions in there. If you use email templates old school, can you use those templates to populate the values from within the team's action? Yeah, we'll pick that one up at the end, Mark. I personally like to build my templates into lists again. So again, I can do replaces, but that's an interesting question. We'll pick that one up later. And great input there by Visa. The shortcut, instead of using JSON to figure it out, is to use get teams action and use its dynamic output internal ID for a general channel ID. Yeah, perfect. So some good questions and a great piece of advice there. So now I've got my team created. What was the next thing that I wanted to do? Well, actually, I wanted to bring together some of the maybe some of the support information, some of the ways that we can build the community. Where do we normally try and build a community? Well, we could do it in Microsoft Teams, but then we have our potentially user limits on it. Whether those limits impact an organization of your own size, that's a different scenario. But I still quite like to use Yammer for creating communities. Because number one, yes, I can be posting my posting announcements there, but I can also I love the question and answer functionality that we get within Yammer. So it gives people a place to be able to post a question, obviously respond, and then people can then mark the best answer. So I personally still quite like to use Yammer for creating this type of community, and that's exactly how the COE is designed to build as well. So what can I do now within my automations to help bring some of this to light? Because not all of our users might be aware that this community is here. They might not be aware that there's somewhere that they can go and ask for help rather than constantly going to the IT help desk. So let's have a look at the next part. So I'm going to bring in my next scope, which is the support for the creator. So there are different things that I can do here. So how can we start to build out this contextual information? Well, I can store something very simple, such as, I'm just going to grab the Yammer community URL, and then I can put that into my email or into my Teams message. But let's actually give a little bit more in there as well. Let's actually go and get some messages from the group so that we're not just giving a URL, maybe we're actually giving some examples about the sorts of things that have been posted in there. So we can use the Yammer connector to be able to bring this together. I can build that up into a string so that I can then go and use that in my maybe in my email, maybe in my messages. So I can start to bring more of that community information, more of that community support together. And the more that we build these communities internally, the more we're going to see the adoption, because we've got champions, we've got people who are helping each other, but it's also giving you that place. So again, if there are changes to the governance plan, you can help to get that engagement. You can put it into an area where you can announce it, you can gain the feedback, you can provide the additional support around it without having to go through huge amounts of work to try and train people on how to do it all again. You're providing that internal upskilling mechanism for both you as an administrator or from the person who's managing the process, but also those people who are helping each other. So I can then start to, let's just go and shrink this down a little bit more. So I can actually let's bring this up above. And then from there, I can start to look at sending in my notifications. So I'm just going to do the very basic one. So I'm just going to go and grab my Yammer community URL, and I'm also going to put that into the messages that I'm sending out. So the more you can do to promote self-help, again, the easier your job is going to be for the people who are, if you are managing your environment. And that could be also done using a team. So if you are using a team, then as well as having the Yammer notifications or the Yammer environment, if you were using a team for this instead, you could automatically take whoever's actually requesting the team, particularly if they've not used it before, and you could actually use the add a member to team option. So now I could automatically look at maybe if they've not used Teams before, or if they're a new creator, a new requester, then I could use the add a member to team to automatically drive them into a team if they're not if it's a private team as an example. And the nice thing is with this, I can set the team, I can give it the user ID, and I can also specify whether they're actually an owner or not. So I'm using this in this case for building that community membership. But I could also use that as an extension for my provisioning process to say, tell me who the people who are going to be members, tell me who the people are going to be owners, and we can automatically add those into the team as well. So I personally really like this one action, because this is now starting to again help me control and automate not just the build of the team, but also building the membership lists behind them. And what was the final part? It was looking at what's going on behind the scenes, what's going on with our SharePoint site. So if I think about what a normal SharePoint site looks like, let's go and grab one of my existing, one of my old teams. Let's give that a quick refresh. And I open in SharePoint, then effectively we have a standalone SharePoint site, which it's not really part of maybe the larger organization. It's not part of the bigger beast. So there are things that we can do again to try and make sure that not only are we working in a joined up way in Teams, but we're also starting to work in a joined up way in the SharePoint sites behind the scenes as well. So how does that work? So let's bring in my final scope. So one of the things that we can do is that we can find all of our sites that have been created. Now, for this, you need to be, the account that's doing all of this work needs to be at least a SharePoint tenant admin to be able to go and create this. But what I can do is on my administration site for my SharePoint environment, so my SharePoint admin center, it's a SharePoint site at the end of the day. So I can hook get items or one of my other SharePoint actions onto that site. And from there, I can then start to look at some of the lists that I have available. Now, this one that I've got on here is actually a hidden list. But what this will do is it will tell me all of the sites that have been created within SharePoint. And it gives me all of the information that I need. It gives me titles, it gives me URLs, it gives me group IDs if they are SharePoint associated with a Microsoft 365 group, which is obviously the case when we're looking at our teams. So I can use this. I'm just going to post this into the chat just so that you've got this, because I get a lot of value by interrogating this list. So this list will give me everything that I need. But how do I find the one site that I'm interested in? Well, like I said, one of the attributes that we actually get from that site is we get the group ID. And that group ID is automatically set when we go and create our Microsoft team. So it will create the SharePoint site for us. It will complete that group ID because it's already associated. So you know what? I've got my new team ID from earlier in my flow. So let's use it again. So I can look for that specific group ID, and that's going to bring back all the information that I want. And once again, because it comes back as an array or as a big blob of JSON, and you will be shocked at how much JSON actually goes in there, you can then go and parse it and then start to make it usable within your dynamic content. So that's exactly what I've done with my parse JSON. From there, all I need to do is look at, or go and have a look at the site that I'm going to use as my hub. So in my hub, I've got this lovely looking site here, which is on a dark theme, just so that we can see the change immediately. But this is where I'm going to drive my global nav from. This is where I'm going to drive my styling from. And it might be that I actually want to drive information from all my associated hub sites back up to the top level. So this is the site that I'm going to associate with. So because I know which hub I'm going to associate with, I can tag onto it, but then I need to make it just one HTTP request. And that's because if I go and just, I can't go and just get that one item because I need to go grab it. I need to go and make a call to find out what my hub site ID is. So that hub site ID gets used down here in the action for join a hub site. So I can give it the site URL because I know what that is, because I've got that back from looking at my big long site list. I know what my hub site ID is because I can grab that from my HTTP call. So those two things combined together will now go and join my SharePoint site that's associated with my team into the wider environment. So there's a lot of manual things here that I see organizations doing. I see a lot of organizations going in and saying, okay, so you've created your team. Thank you very much. Right, here's some information. Send them a message. Okay, great. So now that I've got, I can see your team's been created. Oh, I'm going to make a note in my to-do to go and add that into the hub so that we've got everything looking right. So now we're going to pull it all together in one single automation. Question there, is it possible to get the group ID from this list? Yes, it is. So if I just quickly come back down, and we'll actually see this running in a moment. If I just, so if I just put my compose in there. And I'm going to search for group ID. So we could search for it based on a URL instead of a group ID, but we'll actually be able to get the group ID back. So we do get a huge amount of information back from that. So I'll show you that actually in a moment. So now everything that I need for my governed creation process is in place. So now as a user, all I need to be able to do is go and create one. And what I always try and do is handle two ways of doing that, really. I always like to have something in SharePoint so that people can go and, if people live their lives in SharePoint, they can go and do something. But likewise, we could be doing something within Microsoft Teams as well. And yes, I could, the Power Up that I've got on my SharePoint site, I could go and put into Teams. I could use using Microsoft Lists and then go and put in something in the lists. But you know what? We're really here to really sing the praises of the Power Platform. So I'm going to go and speak to a bot, which I've created using Dataverse. And again, this is the free version. So this is the one that's sat within Teams. I've not paid for anything yet in terms of licensing. I would like to create a team. And just while my bot wakes up, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and put this into test mode, just so that we can get this running. Okay, so what is the name of the team? So let's go for the Power Automate Bootcamp. It's going to be using for demo the power of Power Automate. What's the visibility? I'll make it a private one. What type, sort of team would you like to create? So I can take some information there. So if I say it's a project, okay, and what that's going to do is, okay, that's raised a new request for me. Now, because I've got multiple, I can have multiple entry points. I've got everything firing off SharePoint, which we've already seen. So it doesn't matter whether it's Power Virtual Agent, whether it's Power Apps, whether it's Microsoft Lists, it's all going to go into the same place. So I've only got one process that I need to manage. So now, what's happening? My flow's fired. So it's picked up some basic information so far, and now it's waiting for my approval to go and actually happen. You know what? I live my life in Teams, so actually I'm not going to go elsewhere. I'm going to go and have a look at my approvals app. So I can see here I've got my approval request for the Power Automate Bootcamp. So I've got some basic information in there. I'm going to approve that because I'm good and I like the sound of that team, and I think it's definitely useful. Okay, so perfect, looking good. That's going through. What's happening? I can see that my team is being created for me with my naming convention applied. And oh, what's this? We've got a couple of channels being created. So we're looking good. I think the structure that I wanted built has been automatically built for me. What have we had? Well, we've got our message that's been sent to us. So I've got my message automatically dropped into my team with the usage information that I want for this particular team and how it should be used. Just to make 100% sure, I've also sent it to that person as a chat message as well. And I didn't put the HTML in to actually make it a link, but I've got my link in there for the Yammer community, so I can go and find information and ask questions. So far we've ticked the governance aspect for the consistency. We've ticked the user adoption element or the guidance piece because we're providing that, and we're making it as fairly simple and as seamless as possible to actually go and create it. So we're off to a good start. Now what's going on in my flow? So we've gone through all of that. I've set my notifications. So I can just keep dropping through so we can just see some of these things actually in action. And then I come to my handle the SharePoint aspect. Now, one of the things with SharePoint is it sometimes does take a little bit longer to finish the provisioning in the background. So if I try and do my wiring up too quickly, then my flow tends to fail. So I normally put a 10-second delay in before it starts doing all the SharePoint wiring up. But then what am I doing? I'm getting the associated SharePoint site. And I grouped it, or I searched for where the group ID was equal to my group ID. If I go and grab my JSON, and I'm just going to fire up code very quickly. So what I actually get from there is I get everything I could potentially need to know about my team. So this is everything that's stored about that SharePoint site in the tenant administration in the SharePoint Admin Center. So I've got things like my group ID. I've got my site URL. So that's what we're actually pushing later on into the Join Hub to make sure that it's created. But this is a really useful list to be able to see things like what templates applied and so on. So always good to go and have a look at what's actually in there. But then what are we doing? We're sending the HTTP request to the hub site saying, give me your ID. So it's bringing back my hub site ID. And then we join it all together so that I'm taking my newly created URL or my newly created site plus the hub site ID and bringing it all together. So now if I go to my Teams, let's just go and give this a tickle so that I can open it in SharePoint. There we go. So now if I go to open in SharePoint, automatically the associated SharePoint site is there for me to, and it's part of the overarching SharePoint environment as well as being part of the overarching Teams environment. Cool. So how can you then take that further? So that is the basics really of getting there. There's a lot of moving parts. You don't necessarily need to go to that same level. You could just go to the point of creating the team. But why not start to think further? Start to think about wider governance and just each one in silos. Start to think about how you can break those down. So if you want to go further, that's when you can really start to explore the Microsoft Graph, because you can achieve a lot more using the graph than you can with the standard actions at the moment. So if there are different things that you wanted to do, go and use the Graph Explorer, go and find those, go and find what those items are. Then you need to use your HTTP, but bear in mind that using your HTTP requests in that way does require premium licensing. You could utilize Azure automation again to take it further. So again, what I quite like doing behind the scenes is I like some PowerShell to run, maybe to go and change the don't share external flag, or go and do even more using PowerShell. Because that's, even though I used to be a developer, I spend most of my time now doing PowerShell. So my skill, I feel much more comfortable doing it in PowerShell. I can run some Azure automation. I could use Logic Apps instead of Power Automate, and then I could go away and fire off that. So again, you can really extend it. And the key thing is use your imagination. What do you require? What does your organization require from this process? And pretty much the answer now is there's probably a way of doing it. You just need to find the way that works for you, the way that you find is most beneficial. So just really to round us off then, so we've gone through quite a few things there. So we went through my take on adoption, how I build my adoption up. But then for the top three, so the consistency, the user guidance, and the user adoption aspects, we've then looked at how we can make that simple, how we can achieve all of those things by using Power Automate, by being able to do all of the things that someone probably does manually at the moment. Do it automatically, save yourself time, go and do something more productive with your day, rather than just going, right, create channel, create channel, create channel. Oh, you're actually doing that right. We can make sure our users are using things correctly, but without taking away the empowerment for them to go and request them in the first place. So we can provide touch points across the board, whether they are virtual agents, whether they are forms, whether they are lists. We can provide that way to bring it all together to give the end users, and remember, they're the key thing at the end of the day, the end users, the best experience for using the platform possible. Cool, and that's the sermon according to Matt Weston for Sunday morning. Did I miss any questions? Let's have a quick look at a chat. If you've got any more questions now, by the way, I think we've got a few minutes left. Thanks, Damien, for posting posting that link. That's awesome. Yeah, definitely do check out that link. Okay, perfect. So I will stick around. So if there are any questions, then you can, by all means, feel free to ask them. So I'd just like to say thank you all for attending. We've had some. I've been in chat for about the last couple of hours, and there's some great engagement. There's some great questions coming through. Please do stick around for the rest of the day. There's some fantastic sessions coming up. And some of the things that I've spoken about this morning, and I've just brushed over them quite lightly. There are other sessions today, such as the Power Virtual Agent integration and so on, that will be gone into in a lot more detail as we go through the day. So please do stick around. But most of all, thank you to the team for organising this, for giving us the platform to be able to share our ideas, to share our learnings. And because without them, this doesn't happen. So thank yous all round. And if you do need to contact me, then you can scan that QR code. That will take you to my LinkedIn profile. And by all means, please do feel free to connect. And if I can help you in the future, then I certainly will. But for now, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, and please share your connection details in the chat window if you can.
Sure thing. I'm just going to find it. Yeah.
Some feedback from Damien saying, superb, Matt, loved it. You were already watching a YouTube channel during the demo. Going cross-eyed. I really like your error handling and emailing the flow history link on failure.
Cool. Thank you for that. Thank you for that feedback, Damien. Yeah, certainly one of the things that I like to try and do as best practice is always handle errors. And again, the more the easier you can make it for people to find the issues. That again, the quicker you can get that resolution. So thank you for that feedback. That's great.
Thank you very much, Matt. And right, so Vesa. Hi there, Vesa.
Hello. How are you doing?
Vesa, so where are you dialing in from today?
I'm dialing in from Finland.
Awesome. Finland. Fantastic. Beast from the East, has that arrived yet?
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. We have plenty of snow and it's kind of a coldish outside, but minus 10 degrees. I heard from some UK guys that, okay, that's a bit chilly or too chilly for their tasting, but for us, it's more or less usual during the winter. So nothing special. It's winter time, snow, cold.
Oh, so it's business as usual in Finland,
yeah.
Right?
Exactly. So it was fantastic to listen to Matt's session, and there's some joint themes here what I'm going to present as well. So it's an opportunity to ask more or kind of get a different view or different angle for the same things.
Oh, definitely, and that's been the theme, really. There is overlapping content, but there's also depth and scope into different areas, and I think that's what's really valuable, is really all these touch points coming together to build up, paint that full story, and we're really looking forward to that. So thanks again, Vesa, for joining us, and really great to have you. You're a big community, you're a big personality in the Microsoft 365 space. So it's a great pleasure to have you here today. And without further ado, I'm going to share your connection details in the chat. But without further ado, over to you, Vesa.
Thank you. And I'm very happy to be here as well,